Our eternal salutations to that one who is the truth of life and existence, and whom the saints and sages call by various names. Our eternal salutations to that one whose glories are sung in the hymns of the various religious traditions of the world, but whose infinite and undying grandeur no mortal mind can comprehend. Our eternal salutations to that one upon whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their hearts, realizing an ineffable presence in their deepest contemplations. May he prompt our minds toward the path of truth and righteousness. May she reveal herself into our souls and dispel the gloom of death, fear, doubt, and darkness. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Gasho, welcome to our SRV Association's ashram here on the big island of Hawaii. And SRV Loka, which today will become Zen Loka because we open our eyes, hopefully our third eye, as Lord Buddha said, our Dharma eye. I have the Dharma eye within me, he said. And we focus that eye upon the teachings of the Dharma and glean from them some of the profound nectar, or amrit they call it in Sanskrit, that is present inside of these truth principles. Really be, as we might look at here soon. In Zen and in other forms of Buddhism and in Yoga and Vedanta and Samkhya, Tantra, all of these Indian darshanas or paths of clear seeing, it behooves us to look into them as deeply as we can. Our own founder, Lex Hixon, used to say, I hold joint citizenship in 5 different religious traditions of the world. So he was not only somebody who looked into them on the surface, but he took years off of his life to practice them deeply, starting out with Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta particularly, with his teacher, Swami Nikhilananda in New York, for 7 years, writing his dissertation on Gaudapada's Karaka, and having that grounding in Advaita, or non-duality, non-dualism, before he went on and began to explore other religions with that grounding. So it's very important to, and Zen will concur, as we will see by some of these types of Zen we want to look into today, that you get confirmation by one teacher. Even the Buddhas have to get confirmation from other Buddhas. The Buddha fields, as you might have heard, when they rise from one level of realization to the next, because there are some 10 pure lands they're called in Buddhism, where bodhisattvas first take their vows and enter into the 10th land, and then they rise through these different lands, or inner lands, lokas we call them, or akashas, or realms. And they must be confirmed by the Buddhas as they pass through each gate, confirm themselves at a higher and higher level of realization and teaching ability. So these scriptures and the words of the scriptures become very important, as we were mentioning last week. We looked into the three worlds in Zen Buddhism last week, because there was a great correlation between Indian Buddhism, the lesser vehicle they called it back in Lord Buddha's time when Shakyamuni was alive, and then 28 generations of Buddhism in India, and then the great Buddha successor taking it to China. For 22 generations it thrived there, and then it went to Japan. Bodhidharma took it to Japan out of China and arrived in Japan, and there's been two, maybe now three generations of Indian Buddhism in Japan. That's where you get those three words, by the way: Zen, Chan, and Dhyan. Dhyan is Indian word for meditation. Chan is Chinese word for meditation, and Zen is really a Japanese word for meditation. All of the highest non-dual kind. So Dhyan, Chan, Zen, three different languages: Sanskrit, Chinese, and Japanese, showing one succession of 52 generations in a loop. Coming back to the West in the form of teachers like Mayazumi Roshi and Yasutani Roshi and others who came to the West Coast in LA and San Francisco and taught people, influenced people like our founder, like Sixon and Alan Watts, and people of our own country and generations even, who learned Zen Buddhism and qualified themselves in it to a great extent. There was not just a curiosity about it, but there was a deep interest in it to dive deep into the ocean of these Dharma teachings. And whether you say it symbolically or metaphorically, the best thing to do is to do it practically. That is, actually penetrate the teachings and find out the great power in some of these words, in a word like Zen itself, which is really a word that's transcendent of religion and of teachings. It's more a state of consciousness, if you might try to explain it or describe it that way. The state of consciousness that Lord Buddha experienced, which is called Satori or Kensho or Ku or Busho or Jisho, Daigedatsu. There are all these Japanese words that they've come forth with to try and describe the indescribable, in a state of absolute great liberation that these beings rest in. And they get on some mountain, like Christ on the Sermon on the Mount, or Buddha on Vulture Peak, or Muhammad on the mountain. They'll get up on some great, like the Divine Mother on the Himalayas, they'll get up on some great height, and then they'll gather a flock of people who would venture out of the cities and the valleys and actually take the trek up to these mountain places. Hard to get there even physically, to this great refuge in the mountains. But if you made it there, then you'd start to hear these great teachings. There was a story about our own Lord Brahma, and we always have to sing that at least once in almost every class, don't we? Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwara, Gurur Eva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurur Brahma. Gurur Brahma is the first of the Trinity. There's a story about him, leader of the pantheon of gods in India, taking a body and coming down to Vulture Peak and listening to Lord Buddha talk. And it was 550 BC when Lord Buddha was there in the body. And Lord Brahma decided he would go hear the great Buddha speak. on Vulture Peak. So he took a body. He's doing that all the time. Comes out from in and maybe takes up the body of one of his votaries. Like you find those teachings in Yoga Vashishta, where some devotee is standing in the river in the Ganges, and all of a sudden he has a high state of consciousness. Is that him having enlightenment? That may just be Lord Brahma getting into him and using his body. I asked a Christian priest once about reincarnation. He said, "Oh no, I don't want anyone to use my body." So I said, "Well, but it's a blessing if a great being would take over your body." But whatever the case may be, then Lord Brahma used this body to go around and bathe in the river because of the great desire to bathe in the Ganges. Well, much like that, Lord Brahma had a great desire to hear Buddha speak on the Dharma, the great teachings. So he took over a body, as it were, or appeared there on Vulture Peak and asked Lord Buddha to speak on the Dharma. And Lord Buddha just smiled and took a flower and twirled it in his finger. And of all the assembly gathered there, only one person got the meaning of that. His name was Kashyapa. He was the Buddha Dharma successor after Lord Buddha the first. And he was later called Maha Kashyapa, the great Kashyapa, because he was the only one that understood what Lord Buddha meant when he smiled and twirled that flower. And Lord Buddha then said, "Have the Dharma I within me, but it cannot be explained through words, or through the Dharma." So he's talking about this great state of liberation, which is beyond words. But of course, that doesn't mean that you abandon words. If you want to pass teachings on to others, like Lord Buddha did, then he would have to come out of this great silence and begin to speak. And so he would have to come down to a more qualified dualistic level, to leave this non-dualistic level, if you want to put it in Vedantic terms, and give these teachings to people who are hungry to hear them, who need to be reminded of their Busho, of their Buddha nature. See? So, much like we would say, be reminded that the Atman exists everywhere and in all things, in Vedanta. We don't really have much of a correlation to that in Christianity, in which many of us were raised. We just have to think of the Almighty Father as this presence in everything, or pray to Jesus and hope to have a vision of Jesus or something. But in all the Indian traditions, there's this grand idea that Buddha nature, Busho, what do you call it, by a dharmic axiom or principle, or whether you call it by a personage, like an anthropomorphic being, is there in everyone and in everything all the time. It's there before birth, it's there after death, it's there during life, it's there before creation, and it's there after destruction. In cycles, it's present, it's all pervasive. That's probably one of the best English words we have to describe it, all pervasive. And since it's all pervasive, it doesn't move, it doesn't transform, it's never born, it never dies. Well, that kind of all-pervasive, eternal, homogeneous, divine nature is there in everything and in everyone, and awakening to that is really the meaning of Zen. It's also the meaning in all of these other traditions, like the samadhi of yoga, or the nirvikalpa of Vedanta. It's just a matter of all of a sudden having this divine vision. Call it third eye opening, call it veils falling away, calling it having a vision in deep sleep, or call it the opening of a lotus, like the budding of a lotus, or call it divine remembrance, smriti hetu. Ancient Sanskrit word means that beings have this memory of being one with divine reality in them all the time. And so it's just a matter of how many coverings or superimpositions or links. Nidanas are called in Buddhism. I think last week I misspoke and said 9 nidanas, but actually I looked that up again. There are 12 nidanas. There are 12 links which hook you to 3 births, three lifetimes in bondage in one system of Buddhism. So you have to have basically one lifetime to recognize you're bound. That doesn't happen to many people. The world and life is all they know. Matter is all they know, so they don't think of themselves as being bound when they're in a body. But that's when bondage happens in the body. Freedom happens outside the body. It's very rare to have freedom inside the body. That's called jivan mukta. It is possible for beings, but they still have to bear the body, even then. So this state of that's transcendent of bodies and senses and so forth is that state in which you'll find these great souls. You'll have to find them in a body, again, is rare, but you'll have to move inside and try and find their subtle bodies. And along the way, you may find out that you too have a subtle body, and then you'll have to find their causal body, which is like a deep sleep body. And you'll find out that you too share that same deep sleep body. And then when you move deeper in and actually have the realization, in all these ways we've just described it, awakening, then you'll find out that you're one with them. I and my Father are one. And that's always it's the original mind that you're encountering, it's the original thought, it's the original word, it's the original state. And it's unimpeachable. It's a given. And so you can see then India's whole penchant and the way it proceeds is to simply have people wake up and remember this. Waking up is a stage that Lord Buddha called enlightenment. Because once his students ask him, well, you say that there's the awakened and there's the sleeping, there's the free and there's the bound. But isn't there people who are actually trying to waken up? Isn't there a third category of beings? And Lord Buddha said, no, those who are trying to wake up, they're already awake. They just don't know it yet. So he kept it classifications in 2. Those who are just sleeping and those that are either awakening or are already awake. And that's not just a psychological ploy to give you some sort of encouragement along the razor's edge path, but it's actual fact of the matter, that even those who are sleeping have Buddha nature in them. Even the evil have Buddha nature in them. You probably have to go to a darshana like yoga, that is 8-limbed yoga, to understand that better. That these evils that are in other beings are also in you. Good and bad come out of the mind, and then they get dissolved back into the mind, and your Buddha nature is beyond mind. So these great facts are teaching principles, ripi, and there are impediments to them that we found in the West, and that's why I started off talking about people who received teachings from Mayazumi Roshi and Yasutani Roshi and other beings that came from Japan to kind of close the circle, from 28 generations from the original Indian Buddhism to China to Japan. Oh, don't forget, it took a couple side trips to Tibet with Marpa and Milarepa, and then it took side trips to Korea, and it took side trips to Ceylon, and there's Buddhism all over the place. It's budding Buddhism, and it's covered the world without any violence. It's got hundreds and thousands of followers. It's not the most populated religion, but you might say that it's the new Vedanta. Vedanta being so ancient, the Vedas and all. But it's a great manifestation of India, and when it came full circle, it came to Chicago in 1893 with Swami Vivekananda, our great ideal whom we worship here in SRV, the V in our namesake. And there was also Buddhists there at that great hall speaking. And so you could say that this two great arms circled the world and came together in America. The sun rises in the east, but it has to set in the west, as I said last week. So we see these great teachings setting here in the west. It means at the end of an age, Kali Yuga, after the Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapara Yugas have all passed, which are hundreds and thousands of years long themselves, then you find yourself in this dark age. Dark why? And the dark is that everyone believes the world is real and that God isn't. But it's the other way around. God is real, the world isn't. That's the emptiness of Shunyata in Zen. It's the highest thing in Zen that you could possibly get to, is to be empty. That's what they want. No attachments, no impediments, no obstacles. Even beyond the Dharma teachings, because the Dharma teachings are just there to help you remember. You see. Don't forget to remember, as we say. So once remembrance happens, call it awakening, or call it third eye opening, or call it getting into yoga, or call it satori or busho, then you'll find yourself one with the Father, or one with the Mother, if you're a follower of Mother Kali, or Divine Mother Reality. So it would be good to look at not only the teachings, but the impediments to teachings. And in Zen, I found some very good correlations. Now, I had this chart here that I'll refer to occasionally, but it's part of a book that I'm writing on Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism as a kind of correlative comparison. Because to show this 52 generations apart, India and Japanese Buddhism, you can still take the Japanese words and the Sanskrit words and put them straight across from each other and show that they're just the same teachings still manifesting nowadays that were there back when Lord Buddha was living, 550 years BC. So we'll refer to that chart, but this happens to correlate nicely with other things that we find that are impeding us when we take up, say, yoga in the West, or when we take up Zen Buddhism in Los Angeles or San Francisco, where some of these great roshis have settled. And here, right here on the Big Island, I sat in Zazen and even got married by a Zen Roshi named Aiken Roshi, who's now passed. He was in Diamond Zendo on Oahu in Honolulu for years. And Lex and I used to go there and sit at his Zendo together when we were young. I even, as it were, met my wife there, and she was sitting in Zazen. So he came to Big Island and lived here for a long time, Aiken Roshi, and wrote books on Buddhism, Zen Buddhism in practice. So when we enter into any teaching, hopefully we do it with full commitment and follow through, because that's the syndrome Vivekananda accused us of. He says, oh, the Americans, they're like straw on fire. He worked with us for some years. He said, well, they're like straw on fire. They hear something like this and they flare up. But then they just fizzle out. Straw doesn't last long, you see. So he wanted to follow through. He wanted us to stay with the path for 10, 20, 30, 50, a whole lifetime of years in order to extract the essence out of that teaching. That's how long it may take for you to wake up. Because what's posing against you are these past lifetimes or samskaras. Those are also, there are names for that in Japanese too. Like Zen sickness, they call it. Zenbyo. It's one of the forms we'll look at. It just is all this emotion rising up in you when you start to practice. It's all these weird thoughts coming up out of you. It's all this attraction for powers and sensation. It's attachment to the body. It's attachment to occult powers. That's called Zen sickness. So it's as if when you sit down to practice, the minute you sit like this cross-legged, you've opened the base of the spine and up comes all this lust and anger and greed and envy and jealousy and fear and doubt and pride and grief and shame. Shall I go on? The 6 passions and the 8 fetters, they're called in our tradition. And that's just a short list. If you look into yoga, there's 9 more vikshepas or antaryayas that are there. And each system in India has a different list of these impediments. Basically, you could sort of gather it all around desire. See, desire and attachment that forms the karma. And the karma, because it's repeated so much, forms to some scar or conditioning in your mind. And then you're in a problem. You're in a 3-lifetime problem. 1 lifetime to recognize that you're bound. 1 lifetime to get a practice and a teacher to free yourself. And 1 lifetime to live free. You must live 1 free lifetime. And I've also added into that list 1 conscious death. It seems to me the Tibetans, their Buddhism, they really concentrated on the bardo just prior to death and just after death, and what happens before the soul takes birth again with another set of parents in a fetus. See, sometimes getting into the fetus even before it's fully formed, or just when it's about to be ejected from the mother's womb. So a conscious death and a conscious lifetime become very important things, because there's a fear, as I was saying, in people that when you die, that's it. And it's been enforced by worldly systems. You say, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, people live so many lifetimes in ignorance that pretty soon they begin to believe that the world is actually real. It's an interesting statement, because some people sitting around might say, well, isn't the world real? They've never even thought that it might not be real, that it goes away in dream, and it goes away in deep sleep, and it goes away at death, and it also goes away in samadhi, in satori. The world's just gone. You can turn it off tonight for several hours. Stop breathing even, and turn it off. So the appearance of the world, they hook it straight to the mind, and the mind then hooks to the senses, and the senses then hook to the 5 elements, right? 5 elements to the 5 senses, 5 senses to the 5 inner elements in dream, and then those 5 to the 5-fold mind, or 4-fold mind sometimes they call it, all playing around by 5 pranas. And that's why I've been saying, this is why you have 5 fingers and 5 toes, is to remind you that you're engaged in a quintuplication process here. And those connections are being short-circuited. Nobody sits around and says, the world's unreal, as I was just saying. See, only the monks do that, or somebody who gets a good teacher questions you about why you're so attached to the world, and to the body, and to the senses, and to the objects. And you say, well, I've never really thought of it. And maybe you won't when you're young, but when disease starts to come, and old age, and death, and those kinds of things come, then you'll try to, and especially at death, try to extract yourself from the 5 elements. It's very tough work. Your eyes burn, so you're detaching from fire. Your mouth goes dry, so you're detaching from water. Your mind gets unstable, like a candle in a windy place. You're trying to detach from air. So the Tibetans have been beings who have studied this process of death and afterlife. What we would call afterlife, this is really not a very adequate term, but a bardo, a length of time, indeterminate almost, maybe 100 years for some, maybe just a few years for others, in which they're withdrawing from the old form and resting, as it were, or attending upon some other realm in a subtle body, like you would a dream tonight, and then coming back out and doing it all over again. Is that wise? Well, that's a question that every soul has to ask itself. If it's coming forth consciously to be a positive help to others, like Lord Buddha, then I'd say, yes, please, come as often as you like. Welcome. But if it's coming just to suffer, or just to enjoy, I'd say, you shouldn't do it. You should find a way to snap the chain of birth and death, because there are hundreds and thousands of those possible over the span of time. The Mahayuga, they call it. And we can't really take up Tibetan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism without looking at Indian Buddhism. As Lord Buddha, part of the reason that he went into the woods and sat under the bo tree for so many days was, or at least the result of that, was that he saw the loop of the ancestors and the humans. He saw time in cycles. Kala Chakra, he called it. You can't really mistake that teaching. Chakra is a circle and Kala is time. He saw the circle of time. And he saw a way off of it. And that's why he was free. And of the nature of intelligence, because he found a way out of the cycle of time and looked at it. And that's why one of his later teachings was get out of the river and sit on the banks, because the river goes in cycles all the time. From rain to mountain stream, to river, to ocean, back to rain, to mountain stream. So if you don't get out on the banks, then you won't see everything going in front of you and everything coming along behind you, so you'll never get the idea that you're on a circle. Or, as I was just saying, that the world is not real. It's constantly changing. When we say unreal in Vedanta, we mean mutable, changing. Not unreal like a mirage in a desert, although some things here could be called that too. Some things are so illusory, like, say, the son of a barren woman. I mean, there's some real stupid things out there that don't make sense whatsoever that people actually get attached to as truth. Like, oh, what a beautiful full moon. Or a half moon, see, or a quarter moon. It's always full. It doesn't change, it just appears to change. So there's all changing going on, and that's the point of the idea of being anicca, impermanent. Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita calls this place aniccham asukham lokam. Anicca, it is unreal or non-eternal. Asukham, devoid of happiness. Sukha is happiness, and loka, world. So it's the sorrowful and non-eternal world. See, and so he's pretty much pointed that out, spot on. So if you find yourself then in the precious human body, then you should be using it wisely. There are 4 boons that we're given in our tradition. First boon is a human birth. They say that on purpose. Human birth is a great boon, because there you can realize God. You can't realize God in other forms. You need that brainstem, you need that mind, you need that intelligence that visits the precious human form. And you can use that to get enlightenment. So you need that. You need a human teacher who is able to transmit to you the teachings mind to mind. Kashyapa got it from Lord Buddha, remember? Smiled and twirled a flower, and Kashyapa immediately smiled and realized that the Buddha transmitted the teachings mind to mind, and that the mouth and lips were for the Dharma, but the real teaching was mind to mind. Transmission of highest reality from one mind to another. And then you also need the desire to be free. Like I say, most people are not sitting around thinking, I sure wish I could get free of this form. This is not happening, you see. They're either happy in the form or bound in the form and not so happy, as the case may be. But very few are sitting around saying, this is just limited. See? This is limitation incarnate. Life is bondage. Eternal life is freedom. That's why Christ said, with a slap to the face of everyone who didn't understand it, those who love their life will lose it. See, and those who hate their life will gain it again in eternity. See? So it's a pretty bizarre way of saying it. You have to hate your life. That is, you have to hate the idea of limitation. See? It doesn't mean you have to become depressed and complain about everything. That's not what he meant. You must use this body, this precious human body, for this highest good of others, selflessly, not selfishly. Less, not ish. Selflessly, not selfishly. And then you can have that fourth boon that our own Holy Mother added, the friendship of your own mind. She said she'd seen people with precious human birth, with a good teacher and a desire to be free, but they didn't reach the goal. Why is that? She said, because they didn't get their own mind on their side. And she used to say, the mind is everything, my child. It'll take you to Brahman. You have to keep it in very good shape. Now, we must step in here and say that the mind is not just the brain. You see, the body and brain are one thing, but the mind and the soul are different. You see, they're an inner reality. So you have to have an inner life to find them. Outer life, you won't find them. You see, people have been spinning their wheels outwardly forever and not finding the mind. They've just been studying the brain. And so you'll even find that if you study the senses, they connect to the mind, not the brain. They connect to the brain for motor functions and for desires and lower emotions, but the senses connect to the mind through the indriyas. The senses are little gods. Indra is the god of gods. So the power of the eye to see and the power of the ear to hear, for instance, what you're hearing right now, Buddha Dharma and yoga and Vedanta and all that, is a God listening in on what I'm saying. Is a God in you listening in on what I'm saying. The power of the ear to hear is a God. Now, again, people don't think of it that way, so it doesn't become that for them. You have to actually wake up the power of the ear to hear in order to understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. See? And to understand them is not just on the intellectual level either. It's to take them apart and to understand that they're full of particles, just like these objects are full of particles, atomic particles. But words are full of atmic particles, not atomic particles. Words are full of the power to awaken, or not. There are lower words, low-grade mantras, and then there are medium-grade mantras, and then there are very, very elevated mantras. Probably the most elevated mantra would be something like Tat Twamasi. Does it thrill you to hear it? How about Aham Brahmasmi? I am Brahman. This self is Brahman. I and my Father are one. This very self is Buddha nature. I am none different from divine reality. Those are the highest grade mantras, and they have the fewest amount of words, but those words have the most intense particles in them. And these particles, when projected at you, like he is projecting, see these flowers going out towards, beings are shooting arrows towards him, but he's throwing flowers at them. And that's Denshin Inshin, or Inshin Denshin. It means transmitting mind to mind. You see, that's how it happens. That when you focus in on somebody teaching the Dharma, like say Lord Buddha was, then your particles, streams of particles, you're opening up to them, and they're penetrating you. And that's how transmission from mind to mind works. You could start out writing it down, you see, my notes. Right? But pretty soon you just, drop the notepad and just listen. And realize what's happening to you. So you're getting lifted up. Whenever you're in this company of holy beings, you're getting lifted up. They used to go and hear Swami Vivekananda when he was here, after his great appearance in 1893, and He'd speak 500,000 people at a hall, you see, night after night. On his tour he went on. And people would come out and say, they'd be asked, first thing he'd say is, his English is very good, we could understand everything. The second thing is to say, I don't really know what happened to me, but I got lifted up. I didn't really understand a lot of what he was saying, but I just know I was lifted up. So that's this inshin denshin in Japanese. It means this transmission from mind to mind. You all of a sudden are opened up to a stream of wisdom particles that are flowing from a knower of Brahman or a knower of Buddha nature straight into you, and it has an effect in you. Now, if it doesn't have an effect in you, then there's some barriers in the way. That's why some people will respond right away to teachings. Other people will take a while to wake up to them. And some people will just walk away. So that fourth boon then becomes very important, doesn't it? That you have the grace of your own mind. The mind has to get on your side and say, maybe even keep you from making that error. Where are you going? Sit down and listen. You see, open up to the wisdom teachings. Take them home, meditate on them, contemplate on them, and as I've been saying lately, savor them. That's a great art, to learn how to savor them. Just sitting in one place, you can get enlightened by just savoring the teachings. You just have to take them into your mind and roll them around in there. Manana it's called. And you will, after you hear them, Shravana, and then Nididhyasanam, you'll begin to savor them. And then you can walk around free, you see. There's a certain amount of freedom in knowing the Dharma. It frees you on so many levels. It doesn't give you the great enlightenment yet, maybe, because you're still, your mind, your mental complex, your ego, your intelligence, your mind and your thoughts are all undergoing a transformation from hearing those truths. It took Jesus' disciples a long time after he heard what they were saying to come up with the Gospels and so forth. Shankaras too, and Lord Buddha's as well. Then they could spread it around the world when they understood it. But it took a while there for these words that were coming out of these great souls' mouths to have their salient effect on the mind and transform it into such a shape where then it can savor these teachings. That, I can put it this way, you can't stop thinking about them anymore. They're on your mind all the time. In my own experience, 250 charts worth. See, I loved them so much in so many different darshanas that I created 250 charts for people to look at, just to try and bring the point home. See, that there is freedom in the Dharma. And guess what? That freedom is not there in morality and ethics. Morality and ethics is still aware of sin and evil. Where there's good, there's going to be bad, and where there's virtue, there's going to be vice. And where there's God, there's going to be a devil you're fighting. And none of that is enlightenment. That's tripping stones. That's what that is. It's a good start, but that's why Vivekananda said it's good to be born in the church. Don't die in one. You're going to have to find a good teacher, one of those three boons, and then listen to the truth, and then with the grace of your own mind, use these teachings as a lever, see, or as a goad to penetrate through ignorance in your mind. Levels of ignorance that have accumulated over lifetimes, maybe. See, so that's why some people are responding quickly and some people are taking more time. Some people know immediately, the minute they hear it. In the old days, that's quite often what happened. The teacher breathed the Mahavakya into the ears of the prepared disciple, and they immediately went into samadhi. First hearing. Don't you know that this whole mass projection here is based on a word? Everything you're seeing, tasting, hearing, and smelling is based on a word. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Does it sound familiar in the Gospel of John? And he was one of those few disciples that ended up in a cave after Jesus passed, meditating on what Jesus said. He was savoring the teachings that his teacher had given to him, this great rabbi had given to him, and beginning to unwrap them inside of himself. See, so it's a topic that unfortunately I can go on and on about forever, because it's a topic I'm very familiar with and it worked for me. I'm not saying it's the only way to get to enlightenment. There are so many different ways. You can even shock people into enlightenment. It's just that it doesn't last very long when they get unshocked and they doubt it. See, but this way to Brahman, through the teachings of Brahman, on Brahman, Atmagyan or Brahmagyan or Buddha Dharma, as we're saying here, is based in that. See, like right here, Sambho. See, Sambho means Buddha Dharma Sangha. In Tibetan Buddhism, what I was initiated into, one of the three schools that I hold joint citizenship in, is, they call it Buddha Dharma Sangha, triple gem they call it, the triple treasure. So it's the Buddha, Shakyamuni, and then it's his mind full of teachings. And Buddha Dharma Sangha, Sangha is the group that gathers together to hear these teachings. If you can get a group together, it's going to be much more efficacious for everyone present to have the enlightenment experience together. See? There are schools that advise doing it alone. Zen is pretty much one of those. But in Vedanta, you go to realization of your Atman hand in hand, my teacher used to say. You do this as a group. So Sangha is very important. There's another kind of Sangha out there called worldly people, a family of souls who are ignorant to the Dharma, even averse to the Dharma, even antagonistic to the Dharma. They'll go to war against it. Anything to keep out the light, you see, the true light, and to live in the darkness. That's basically where they're living. So it wasn't much different back in Christ's time when they had to run and hide when Christ was crucified. Everyone was on their tail. The Jews plus the Romans. They couldn't go anywhere. So it's America's a bubble right now. It's a bubble, and in that bubble, a few of us are thanks to great souls like Vivekananda who brought this Dharma here, are taking advantage of the time before that bubble pops to get free, to have one conscious death, have one conscious lifetime, to absorb these teachings as fast and as much as we can. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, just take your mind and dip it every day into the ocean of God's teachings on Brahman. Just dip it like it was a towel, so it just becomes saturated with them. Not only is it a way to peace and enlightenment, but it's the way out of disillusionment. It's the way out of depression. It's the way out of distraction. Because those things can't get in if you're concentrating on the Dharma. See, we were talking about it last week over prasad dinner. See, basically I could put it one way to you. All the ways I put it, I could put it one way. Enlightenment is concentration. And those who know how to concentrate will be free. As long as they keep their concentration up, they will be free. And you could say, even if they concentrate on mechanics, or if they concentrate on physics, or if they concentrate on music, whatever they're concentrating on, as long as their concentration stays unbroken, they're free. Free of what? Distractions, sufferings, the creation of karma that'll come back later. Because if you're doing something in concentration, in balanced mind, you're not forming any karma at that moment, or in that hour, or at that night, time of night, which you concentrate. But the minute you fall out of yoga, which means fall out of concentration, karmas come rushing. You're doing actions out of balance. in rajas or in tamas. That is either slothfulness or in restlessness. If you do actions in either of those two, you're mounting up karmas again that are going to come back on you in cycles. So, art of concentration, that's the fifth limb of yoga. If you reach it, you've just passed the fourth limb. What is the fourth limb? What is the problem with the fourth limb? Is not being able to focus the mind and withdraw it from objects. It's objects and desires that pull you out of concentration. Oh, I think I'll give up my concentration and court this and that, you see. That pleasure and that pain behind it. I'll just court those, you see. And so my third eye closes and my two eyes open, and there I am in this problematic state of mind. Kshipta, Mudha, and Vikshipta, the father of yoga called it. I can't teach you if you're in those three states of mind. That is, I'm either dull, my mind, unreceptive, or I'm scattered all over the place like mustard seeds blown out of the package by the wind. See, good luck getting them back. Scattered mind, kshipta. Or I'm vikshipta. I've reached a state where I can concentrate sometimes, and other times I can't. I fall in and out of yoga. Because yoga is concentration of mind. Perfect concentration of mind. And there's no reason why you can't develop the ability to stay in it all the time. And that's the preferred way of living for the yogis, and for the seers, and for the sages, and for the rishis, and for the avatars. They just won't back down out of that. That's their default zone. They would be anywhere up here in bliss and peace and love and dharma and teachings, everything. The minute they came down and said, oh, do you want to just lose your concentration for a split second? Oh, no thanks, you see. I'm not even going to go near that, and the dangers that are involved in having an imbalanced mind or an unconcentrated mind, even for a few minutes. See? So this is a vigil you keep as a spiritual aspirant. If you're committed and if you're a practitioner, this is a vigil you keep. This is your default zone, and if you're falling through it, something's got to be shored up. See, there's leaks in my pot. I keep honey in a clay pot that has cracks. Come back, half it's seeped out all over the ground. So I need to plug that up, those leaks, you see, so I can hold this nectar of wisdom and never lose it, ever again, because it's all inside of me. Interesting thing is that even when I lose it, it's still there, because you're losing the outer part of it. See, when a man engages in childbirth, you see, and expends his semen, he's expending the liquid part of it, but the essence of it is still within him. He needs to take that up the spine. That's ojas talking about, you see. So you could be outright celibate and not have to deal with any kind of leakage, and that's why the monks will reach enlightenment so quickly, you see, or at least peace of mind, resolve. But for the householder, it's going to have to be, they're going to have to deal as best as they can with the world and its activities, but hold a portion of themselves back, you see. Sacrosanct. Never compromise it, you see. And if you can do that, that's a kind of concentration that will stand you in good stead. At the end of your life, you won't lose everything into the void. Just go completely unconscious, like so many people do. Wake up again upside down. Their first mantra, wah, wah. Should be saying, why me? And they're saying, wah, wah. After they say, why me, they say, who am I? And after that they say, I am. Wah, wah, why me, who am I, and I am. Those are the 4 levels of lower to middling to high grade mantra. So those in concentration are going to keep I am. There's no other way to it, you see. I am that Brahman. I and my Father are one. Be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is. Perfect. And that's the ideal, that's the goal, that's the truth. And why should I fall out of it? See? So some of the ways they do fall out of it are shown here in this chart. My preamble today was a little bit longer than usual, but it's around this idea of word, you see, and transmission. Inshin denshin is in Japanese. To open to this wisdom transmission and take it in and wake up more and more fully. And then also this idea of impediments to your original Buddha mind. Original mind, Buddha mind. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. Pure mind is God. So you want to have this chit shuddhi. Your thoughts must be pure. So you'll strip them of all these overlays and all these weights. People are trying to do that with their senses. Oh, I think I'll take the senses from the objects. That's limb 4. But when you get limb 5, you'll be dwelling naturally in your own concentration. That's in your own true nature. Only then can you really meditate. Yes, there are people having good meditations, but they fall right out of meditation the next day. They need to have an unbroken stream of consciousness, like pouring oil from one beaker to another. Do you know that? You know what that's called in Sanskrit? Someone knows it. Tailadharajan. So it's the mind's contents being poured into Brahman. Without a break, just like you would pour oil from one beaker to another. Not water, because water will splash. Oil will make just a perfect rainbow arc from one beaker into the other. Smooth, unbroken. So that's how your mind has to be on thoughts of God. Om tanhir grihit fau panashadam mahasram sharam yupasanashita sandhyayita ayamya tad bhavakatena chetasya laksham tadevaksharam somya vidhi, the nectar of wisdom, somya vidhi. So it means take this bow called your mind, fasten to it the arrow of thoughts made sharpened by thoughts on God alone. Then aim it at the target, release and penetrate the mark. The mark is the imperishable Brahman, your true nature. So sharpen your mind by thoughts on God alone. You might have to go to a cave. You might have to go on retreat. You might have to sit in zazen for 8 hours a day for a month. In order to strip the mind of all unworthy thoughts, of all wasteful thoughts that are wasting your time, like, say, brooding. I've actually gotten people over the problem of brooding. And sometimes psychiatrists ask me, how did you do that? I said, by telling them that brooding is the worst waste of time possible. And it gives way to depression as well. So, depending on how you define the word, there's a kind of brooding that's not so bad. I'm not saying that. A mother hen broods on her eggs, you see. So there's some, not all negative, but basically, you know what I'm saying, it's a scattered mind that broods here and there, broods on things that it fears for the future, and those things will never happen. See? So it looks back later and says, I spent all that time brooding for years on something that never happened in the end. See? So a lot of it is based on past, present, and future. The 3 phases of time. But guess what? The present is a phase of time. You don't want to live in the present. You want to live in the eternal moment. That's beyond time. Where the moment freezes, that's where the yogis enter, right here. And time stops. The present is a phase of time that you're enjoying every moment, right? So enjoyment is still there, and so is losing your enjoyment and brooding on it. So time has got to go. Death has got to go. I received an order from the Divine Mother of the Universe that death must die. One song in India sings, you see. I received a commandment from the Divine Mother of the Universe that death must die. Time must die. Space must go away. And the great emptiness, Shunyata, has to come upon me. So there are 5 types of Zen here that are problematic in the attainment of this kind of constancy, this kind of concentration we're talking about. And you can see them there. Call them mayoi. It's like a very close word in Japanese to our word, maya, in Sanskrit. It's these errors along the dharmic pathway. So this poor fellow is thinking about them, you see. He's brooding a bit, but it might be some good inner brooding he's doing, you see. So he can come up with some answers for this. There you see them there. 5 types of Zen. Let's look at them as the live streaming audience can also see them on their screen. First, a quote there. The goal of Zen is Busho, consciously living in one's imminent nature, which is devoid of mass, beyond individuality and personality, and outside the realm of imagination, synonymous with Shunyata. So you can't think of your true nature as having mass, weight, dimension, height, depth, breadth, length. That's the physical world you're talking about. When you go inside your dream, all of that disappears, right? You're dreaming in one tiny little area, as it were. And that disappears when that bubble pops. So there's no dimension or height or width or length or depth or mass or weight to the soul. You have to disconnect from the physical. One of the hardest things for the Westerner to do is to disconnect from the physical. Sometimes they'll even say, oh, I'm not physically oriented, I'm not attracted to the physical or bound by the physical, but that's not true, they are. And their thought processes and their ideologies and even their imaginations are all based on form. Form is physical. So you're going to have to shift to a subtler form. See? You can't give up form altogether all at once, so shift to a mental form, a thought form. Like Swami Vivekananda used to say, you can destroy the clay cup, but you can't destroy the thought clay cup. So here we're getting on the trail of the word, right? How words and objects, how the object is a manifestation of the word or the thought. And so you can take it back. All these billions of people projected the physical world, so if they all went to meditation at the same time, the world would disappear, because it's all a mental projection. So they have to take it back. It's called dissolving the mind stream. It's a very powerful meditation that they practice, dissolving the mind stream. So when the goal of Zen is Busho, like Buddha nature, then you want to be living constantly in your imminent nature. It's very nicely put. Imminent, it's like right there, immediate. It's faster than the fastest, slower than the slowest, higher than the higher, and lower than the lowest. See? It's immediate. It's timeless. And so you'll have to stop everything to see it. That's why you go to a cave. Or when you have an enlightenment experience, everything goes away for you. It's Shunyata, it's all empty of everything except you. It's empty of thoughts, it's empty of problems, it's empty of pleasures, it's empty of desires, it's empty of objects. Only thing left there is the one looking on. And that's how the enlightenment experience proceeds or occurs. In nothingness, in emptiness. Your true nature is formless. So the physical will have to go along with time and space. So you'll have to open yourself up to that, qualify yourself for that by degrees, if necessary. And the Dharma teachings will help strip away thoughts that are errant. See? Errant thoughts are destroyed in the Dharma. That's the great saying in Tibetan Buddhism. All errant thoughts get destroyed in the Dharma. So when you study higher thoughts, the lower thoughts will go away. Father of yoga calls that klista and aklista. Klista vrittis. Klista vrittis are negative vibrations in your mind, and they will go away by simply taking up aklista vrittis, positive vibrations in the mind. But don't stop there. Then go beyond positive vibrations to no vibrations. Be willing to make that shift from bad to good, and from good to better, and from better to best, as Vivekananda used to say. And you'll have that state of enlightenment experience where only thing left is your true nature. You can't miss it. And you miss it because of all these overlays that you're concentrating on, that you're focusing on. You're falling out of non-duality because those veils have been dropped in front of you, and you stop to examine them. Oh, what's this veil made of? See? Instead of just brushing it out of the way, see your true nature. Well, here are some of those forms of Zen that we want to make sure we don't fall into. We don't want to equate them with true Zen. Like, for instance, there's Buji Zen. A light and immature attitude towards the teachings, wherein practitioners think that since they have already Buddha nature in them, they do not have to do practice or seek enlightenment. So that's that cavalier attitude that people come upon. You see, they hear they have Buddha nature and say, "Okay, we're perfect." See, that's sort of what Advaita Vedanta has come up against too. When you say the self is Brahman, then they think that maybe they don't have to practice in order to realize that great thought. So they're walking around saying this self is Brahman, and it's just mere lip service. They haven't done the work yet to strip away all the coverings from the gift and see the diamond nature inside of them. See, when they have that vision, they'll be looking and acting in an entirely different way than when they're under the influence of Buji Zen. How about across the board, Yako Zen? It's called Wild Fox Zen. Inflicting those who pretend to be enlightened, but really only mouth the teachings, having no deep or true realization of the Dharma whatsoever. So, another form of pretentiousness that's coming upon the potential practitioner who stops short of the goal. How about Hassan? Hassan is interruption of Zen practice by an enlightenment experience, celebrated but not stressed, that keeps the aspirant from gaining many more and higher profound experiences. Hassan. See right here, back on this chart that we're looking at, here's Hassan. Interrupted practice due to spiritual experience. Across the board, unmadana, attachment to subtle bliss, is what we would call that in Vedanta or yoga. You get attached to the subtle bliss experiences you're having inside, and that interrupts your practice. It's so classic of only going part way. So you're getting your path interrupted by having an experience that you think might be the ultimate experience, but you don't go on to have the full enlightenment experience. You don't go on towards these Dai Gedatsu, the great enlightenment. So it's good to know that the Zen Buddhist practitioners and the Roshis teach that. See, you can celebrate that you had an experience like having a signpost, you see, in a wilderness that pointed your way, but you don't stop there and grab onto the signpost and don't go forward to where it's pointing. You see, man comes out of the woods. He's not eaten for days. He's unhappy. He's wet. He's cold. Sees a signpost. Civilization 10 miles. He grabs the sign and won't let go. And he never gets 10 miles further to his goal. So that's this problem of Hassan. Across the board again, Goseki, trace of enlightenment. Sticking to those practitioners who cling to their initial insight experiences instead of living as if oblivious to their own enlightenment in a natural way. And sometimes you see that in other practitioners too of other religious traditions. They say just stick to this surface level of enlightenment, but they don't go the full distance. Zembyo was mentioned earlier in my preamble at today's class. Zembyo is Zen sickness, which make up the host of distracting thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, appearances, and broodings that arise during the course of a student's practice of Zen. Well, that's why you sit for so long, is you want to churn up the contents of the mind. And it doesn't happen in everyday life, because you're just going on with your various actions, and sometimes a negative thing will arise in your life. Sometimes positive things are going on. Sometimes there's a balance. There's a sattvic period, and then there's a difficult period. You get ill, whatever. Various things happen, and so, but all of this is taking your mind away from the fact that about this great goal, you see, that you've committed yourself to. So that's a kind of distraction that's going on. It's much like our yogic practice of yoga when we come upon kshipta and vikshipta mind, distracted mind and scattered mind. That's also going in cycles. So Zen sickness, all those things almost offer themselves for individual commentary. Distracting thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, broodings. Those are all problems in the human mind that need to be X'd out of the equation. So you'll have Zen health instead of Zen sickness. This is probably obvious to many people listening if they're practitioners, but sometimes just to pinpoint it is important. Because then you can find out any one of these things, if not more, that have been plaguing you, even subtly, and you can go in to remove those. The Dharma and the Dharma preceptor is giving you permission to do that when they outline these teachings. So you go to class, or you go to sit, you go to Zazen, or you go to Dharma teachings. That's your opportunity to pinpoint your problems and remove them. If you need permission, there it is. Like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, hold up a white paper to the light and you see all its dark specks in it. Otherwise it looked creamy white, perfect. So that's what happens to the mind. It gets held up to the teachings of the Dharma. It can then see these dark specks that aren't necessarily interrupting life all the time, but come up every once in a while and exert their insinuations into your life and cause the flow, to be interrupted. That flow of oil from one beaker to another gets interrupted, and you wonder why. So you need to inspect the mind for those dark specks and take them out with the Dharmic teachings. These are like tweezers or pinchers, see. And you use them as a tool, and you go in there and you eradicate any sickness that might be going on, any problem that might be going on, any imbalance that's happening to you. Well, across the board again then is Makyo, diabolical phenomena, like the negative circumstances of the ordinary world, which the practitioner should not entertain in the mind, letting them turn into mental hallucinations. Like sometimes I've used the experience I had of a man I knew that just sit and watched TV all day, and got so angry all day, just yelling at the TV. Everything he saw in it made him angry. News and various things. So you get completely taken away by this diabolical phenomena, which in itself is not real. Like, say, people found out that 100,000 souls died in a tidal wave, and it just puts them off their path for weeks. Is it unsympathetic or non-compassionate if you didn't get bent out of shape by that? No, you never lose your balance for anything. 100,000 souls were bubbles that rose in the ocean, and then they passed away and dissolved, and they just dissolved back into the ocean. That's the way the enlightened soul would be looking at it. Buddha under the Bo tree would be seeing people being born and dying all the time. Isn't that a part of our web information now? How many people are being born every minute and how many people are dying? And are we all getting Zen sickness because of that? Or are we saying that's just a cycle of life and death? Better yet to say they're all birthless and deathless. Like Arjuna on the battlefield, he has to go kill his relatives on the other side of the field, Kurukshetra. And Krishna says, you can't kill them because they were never born. And Arjuna, wow, I never thought of it that way. See? The soul is birthless and deathless. What are you killing? And who's doing the killing? See? If the ocean rises up and kills us 100,000 souls who were never born, then what is it that's being destroyed? Destruction itself is an illusion because the soul is beyond creation, preservation, and destruction. I mean, if these teachings have been driven deep enough into your mind, then you may say that's too bad and have compassion, but you're not going to get off your path because of it. To get off your path would be to admit that birth and death exist. See, you're going against the precepts that you accepted when you took your commitment to spiritual life. My soul is birthless and deathless. Teacher tells you that, say, that's great, I know that, I hear that. And then at the first opportunity, you believe in someone else's death? Or you think a baby got born? That's bodies that are getting born and dying, not souls. And as soon as you can detach the soul from the body, the better from you. One is spirit, one is matter. One is wheat, one is chaff. I'll put it in any way you want. It's been put by thousands of illumined souls from time out of mind have been telling you this. Time to get over Zen sickness about it, called emotion, and settle into the fact that the soul is one indivisible, birthless, deathless mass of pure conscious awareness. And it's not subject to time and space. And I think I'm that. See? I am that. I never was not that. See? There never was a time when those princes and those warriors on the other side of the battlefield were born. There will never come a time when they die. They're the Atman. See? Krishna tells Arjuna. They're birthless and deathless by their very nature. Now, you're in a war, go kill them. See? Kill them knowing that you're not doing killing, that killing is an impossibility. In other words, do that action with no emotion. Strike them down like the sword of God. That's their karma to be there. And when you take away their body, they're going to rise up like light. Ah, that was a nice play. I think I'll do it again. Or not. Putting on bodies like a child outgrows clothes and puts on a new set, Krishna says in the Gita. So it's profound philosophy, and it's startling to some. But when you think about it and entertain it in your mind for a while and savor it, then you begin thinking along non-dual lines. There never was a time when I was ever born, and there will never come a time when I die. See, that's ridiculous to think such things. I'm just this one flow of continuous consciousness, unbroken, like oil flowing from one beaker to another. Then I want to make sure that that oil flows into Brahman, into the ocean of birthless, deathless awareness. We talk about light all the time, the ocean of light and so forth, and people seeing it. Should we let it down at the first hint of difficulty? Or should we run towards it, arms open, embrace the light? There are people, depending on the state of their mind, who in meditation see the light, and if their mind isn't in a good state, they'll retreat from it. See? Afraid, fear. See? But a couple of weeks later, they're in that same meditation, and they see the light, and their mind's in a sattvic cycle, and they rush towards it. They have an experience of enlightenment. And they come back into the body, and they never died. So they're free in that way, you see. So to keep the mind in that sattvic condition is very important. You be sattvic all your life and then get all of a sudden depressed at the time of your death, that's not a good thing. You pass out of your body in a tamasic cycle. No. You master the gunas and you keep your mind, as our founder, like Sixon did, always in a positive state. Like these great souls. Dark night of the soul came to Christ in the wilderness. Mara showed himself up. Death showed himself up to the Buddha when he meditated under the Bo tree. They faced these off and saw themselves to be Buddha nature, or Almighty Spirit, or Tathagata Garbha, or Busho. Buddha nature. And then death was put in its grave. That's what my teacher told me once. You must make fear afraid of itself. You must put death in its own grave. And therefore rise up and live in that state. So diabolical phenomena, of course, will not be able to affect such a one. Now, the last two, and we'll have our break here. Bono, worldliness, sensuality, passions, longings, sufferings, and misery, all rising from a false view of the world. I want to show you that false view of the world after the break. So we'll take up Bono right after we come back. Kato is another one, across the board. Thicket of creeping vines, it means in Japanese. Kato, meaning falling victim to hearing too many words while failing to take the essence out of them. Why, you might have been experiencing that right here today in this class, because we're using Sanskrit, we're using Japanese, and English. So you're having to shift in between the meanings of these things. But that's in part why I gave that preamble today about the power of words. You might think that the Zen Roshis are very silent beings, right? They don't like to speak much. But what they tell us is, if you can't express your enlightened experience in words, then you haven't had enlightenment. So, like Buddha coming out of his 50 days of sitting under the Bo tree and being silent in nirvana, all of a sudden had to break his silence to speak to those noble eight that were around him, to tell them about the experience of nirvana as far as words could say what he experienced in that deep state. And that's why 52 generations of Buddhism happened all the way here to the west coast of America. If you hadn't have spoken, it wouldn't have happened, you see. The most peaceful march of religion the world has ever seen, that transformed minds without raising a sword or a finger, would never have happened if Buddha hadn't have come out of nirvana and spoken what he experienced there. So that's the import of words, especially those words that are geared particularly to spiritual life, and which show us about our true nature. And if we have to use them as flowers, even as arrows, to penetrate through this thicket of creeping vines, this Zen sickness, and these other forms of false Zen, you might say, then we should do that as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So here is a good time to end. We will come back and look at this false view of the world in the eyes of Zen after the break. Thank you for your attention. And we welcome you back to the second half of our second class in Zen Buddhism here at the SRV Associations. And we've been looking at mayoi, distractions, and principles, both, taking an eyeful look at both sides. As far as this chart that we've been taking up, we looked at all of these problems in Zen, and we should look at the actual 5 types of Zen too. Banpo Zen is unenlightened person practicing Zen for bodily and mental health. If you were to look back here in our chart of reference, if it's here, there it is, practice of Zen for health and longevity, across the board, Hatha Yoga, practice of yoga for health and longevity. So you see that there is that tendency in Japan too of people and practitioners of Zen getting fixed just on the physical level of things, as I was saying in the first half, body and breath alone, instead of moving through that. And that's called Banpo Zen, unenlightened person practicing Zen for bodily and mental health only. Mental health there refers to the brain. Have a healthy body-brain complex, but mind really has to do with the kingdoms of heaven within you. That takes you deeper. There's Gedo Zen, the outside way, which is mixing Zen with teachings of other traditions. We might say, don't do that at home, kids. Stick with one confirmation, one roshi, one teaching, school that can enlighten you and go the full distance in it. There have, of course, been cases of many of the living Buddhists themselves who practiced other traditions after they were enlightened, so that's a different matter. But it's better to stay to one path and one teacher to avoid distractions and misunderstandings that may arise if you try and walk 2 paths or take 2 teachers simultaneously. To be very careful of that. Shoujo Zen, the small vehicle, mainly seeks discontinuation of rebirth and cycles. And as compared to Daijo Zen, great vehicle, observes the unity of all things and Zen in everyday life. And then Saijojo Zen, supreme vehicle, where way, path, and goal are all fused into one. Those 3 kind of go together. The small vehicle, the great vehicle, and the supreme vehicle in Zen. Good to compare them. The small vehicle interested in getting you out of rebirth and ignorance and cycles. So there are quite a few people who, of course, don't think that way, don't think in terms of reincarnation. In several religious traditions don't bring up the idea of reincarnation or teach it. It's just a one lifetime scenario, and that's also, of course, the way the materialists think as well. Of course, consciousness itself doesn't reincarnate. That's with a capital C. And so you're going to have to go into this mental complex that's creating karmas and unresolved residue in the mind that's going to congeal during a life and at the end of a life, and then that congealed mind will come back again in another lifetime and form another fetus and take another set of parents and live another life. And it may add to that 12 links style, is what we were talking about in the 12 Nidanas. Lord Buddha's 3 main teachings there would be the Eightfold Path and the 4 Noble Truths, and then the doctrine of interdependent arising, and where everything is interconnected to everything else, and not in such a good way all the times either. And then the system of the 12 links or nidanas. Those are 3 of the great Buddhist teachings that he gave when he was on earth. And so these 12 links are going to create samskaras and karma through a series of 3 lifetimes, as we were saying. I have a chart on that too. Maybe I can bring it for class next week. Those are the 5 types of Zen. And then we had these other Zens that we looked at, forms of Zen which are problematic. And I said that we wanted to take Bono Zen and look at what a false view of the world is. And I just happen to have a chart that's pretty good for doing so. Let's bring that up. Has to do with these mental postures that bind, is what it's called, or mental perspectives that stymie one's spirituality. There you see the courtesan, worldly person amongst wealth strewn all around her, and has turned away from the Buddha, who is teaching these kinds of principles. If you can't see them there, I'll read them from the bottom up. Sensitivity to the sufferings of others, equanimity of mind, freedom, that is knowing one's soul to be ever free, one's Buddha nature in this case, truth, wisdom, universality, that is, of course, has the opposite of narrowness, humility, generosity, spirituality, love of God, positivity, support of others, forbearance of all ills, compassion for the sufferings of others, selflessness, service to others, or service to God and mankind, if you would, the way Swami Vivekananda put that, and also the ability for transcendence of mind. All of those things you could, and more possibly you could say, would be a short list of qualities that Lord Buddha emanates in by his very being. Now, the quote here, well, we'll read that in a minute, but back to Bono, this is a false view of the world that they want to get you over. So here's this soul here, bathing in wealth, as it were, and in pleasure, and holding these kinds of thoughts. Religion is false. God does not exist. There is no soul. Well, you know, she may be right about that, but in the wrong way, if you're a Buddhist. And then I seek pleasure. Wealth is the goal of life. I only live once. I am the body. That's the first of 16 evolutes of Maya. I am the body. The world is real, and objects can make me happy. Remember last week we looked at the meaning of emptiness, right? If you remember that chart on emptiness we put up, and how objects are to be seen as empty in two ways. One, empty of substance, that is, there's no real substance, but if you looked at an object like science has, swirling particles is all it is. It's got the appearance of solidity, but if you take it apart, its constituent is just swirling particles that are changing at a billionth of a second. So it's empty of substance. In other words, we would say it's a projection of your mind, or of the word, of the thought. And then the second way objects are empty is that they can't fulfill you. They've never fulfilled anyone, also because they've also come out of your mind. Objects are in your mind to begin with, then you project them outwards, then you lose them, and then you fall into depression over it. When the object came from you in the first place, and you can always go back to it. So you get caught in the outer process of the mind's dynamics of projection. Shristi, sthiti, and laya, we call that. Projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. But people project, but then they can sustain it, but they can't withdraw it. So that's a kind of attachment that only goes 2/3 of the way. You also need to be able to dissolve it back into your mind. And this isn't just true with the object, it's also true over 4,320,000,000 years that things are getting projected, sustained, and withdrawn. And you're the one that's witnessing all of that. If you want to put it in a little bit more understandable way, then try 80 or 90-year lifetime. You should be able to project sustain and withdraw your body-mind mechanism inside of that time. And maybe even every 24 hours in meditation, when you sit, you should be able to dissolve. Maybe then again, you should be able to do it in sleep. See, when you project the world, it's waking, and when you sustain it, you're dreaming it, and then when you withdraw it, you destroy it. And that's going on in 24-hour periods. So if you look at it in terms of a minute, a breath, in-out held breath, or whether you look at it in terms of a 24-hour day, or if you look at it in terms of a cosmic cycle, that process is always going on, and objects are the end product, end result of that. That's where everything gets solid. It's where everything gets liquid, everything gets gaseous, everything gets turns into the 5 elements. And that's the farthest out that you can go in consciousness. But that's really sort of the point, that all is consciousness. Consciousness has been at the foundation of all of that projection process. So when the projection process happens, you forget consciousness. Right? You forget the one who did it. That's you. Or you blame it on God. God has nothing to do with that. God is formless, so why would it have anything to do with projecting, creating, and sustaining, and destroying forms? It's formless all the time. You prove that when you go into formlessness yourself, called Satori, or any of these words in Zen and Advaita and other forms of religion like yoga, that God is absolute and formless. So if you've proven that, then there must be something else going on in this projection, sustenance, and withdrawal process. It must be a great mind that's doing that, based on a great word, for instance. So these are the thoughts that you'd have to entertain in order to get over this thought, like object can make me happy. It can also make you sad, and then happy again, then sad again. But if you know that they've come out of your own mental process, then you can withdraw from them. And that's where true happiness is. You get peace when you've been able to live at ease amongst objects. The monks will renounce objects completely, and that way will be free of name and form. But householders should be able to move amongst the objects without getting attached to them. That's a good way of concluding it. Monks completely renounce them. Householders should move amongst them without getting attached to them. And they should do that based on the fact that they're empty of the ability to fulfill you and of any lasting substance. So, to repeat last week's chart on emptiness, Shunyata is like one of Zen's greatest teachings, maybe the greatest teaching in Zen. They love the idea of emptiness more than any other. That's what makes it a very unique religion. You don't find that defined and expressed in other religions so succinctly as in Zen and in Advaita Vedanta. To try and court emptiness is just not in very many people's capacity. See, they won't go there. And when they do, they'll find it difficult. But when they go to sleep tonight, they find it completely natural. It's called deep sleep. Everyone goes formless with the least amount of effort. And they get their best rest in a formless state. You can dream for 8 hours and wake up a nervous wreck. But you can go into deep sleep for 30 minutes and be rejuvenated for 24 hours. So there must be something very benign and powerful and positive about formlessness. Say, for instance, take it out of the realm of sleep and just put it in the realm of people's everyday life. If you have a meditation practice, you'll find those people are the most peaceful. They can go amongst the vagaries and vicissitudes of the world and life without reacting so much. You see, they won't fall problem to Zen sickness as much as other people. But if they don't have a meditation practice, then they're subject to almost every ill that comes their way, and they'll react to it. And according to the father of yoga, the worst thing you can do is to react. He's saying basically that bad things happen to good people. But the difference between good people and bad things happening to good people and bad things happening to not so good people is that when they happen to good people, they don't react. And when it happens to not so good people, they react. Like the man sitting in front of TV cursing the news. And the other person is saying, another phenomena went by. Another politician came into power and went. Another nation rose and fell. Not ruffled at all, doesn't react. So it doesn't cause a karma or a rift in consciousness, because consciousness is riftless. So why cause one there that's unreal? I think I chanted that last week. Ignorance is unreal, so it can't cause you any real doubt. So those things are great thoughts. These things are not so great thoughts, which is why we brought them up here in correlation with Bono. Worldliness, sensuality, passionate longings, sufferings, all rising from a false view of the world. Besides these main ones that people entertain, I put this little list over here too. On the opposite side of Lord Buddha's great thoughts are these. Worldly bondage is best. Worldly knowledge is best. Matter is all there is. I seek only my own good. I am better than others. Ignorance is bliss. The body's health is paramount. My race is superior to others. Only my religion is true. These are fallacious thoughts, negative thoughts, and will give you a false view of the world. Over time, pretty soon you'll believe the world is the only reality, and you'll X God out of the equation. God here to us means Buddha nature, Chaitanya, pure conscious awareness, timeless, deathless consciousness, homogeneous awareness, transcendental reality. There are different words that you can put it in English and in Vedanta and in Buddhism to draw a distinct line between matter and spirit. Sri Ramakrishna puts it nicely here. It is all a question of the mind. Bondage and liberation belong to the mind alone. If one holds false thoughts, then the world seems real and God disappears from sight. Further, it will not do to merely repeat, I am he, I am he. Beings get free by following up affirmations with spiritual discipline. In the case of the worldly, they never think about God even by accident. If they do find the right mental perspective, it lasts only about as long as a drop of water on a red-hot frying pan. I like particularly that one part where he says you should follow up affirmations with spiritual disciplines, because that goes very well with some of these false Zens. That people are saying, I'm enlightened, or I'm perfect, I'm Buddha nature, but I never did any practice to prove it, you see. I'm just trying to convince others of it when I myself have not even gotten enlightened. I'm pretending, or I'm hoping, or I'm deluded. One of those three. But here it's very, very well put. You could hear the great Mahavakyas. Someone could say, haven't you heard of Advaita Vedanta where they tell you you are Brahman? Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. I like that. So, that's half positive right there. They've heard the truth and they've accepted it at the surface mind level. But he says these affirmations have to be followed up with spiritual disciplines. I think that's maybe the most important thing for us to know right now in the West. Because when I look around the West, and I go to different homes, and I go to different places and cities and various things, I see one thing missing that's of most import. That's nobody's doing a spiritual practice. There are so few people who do a spiritual practice. And they think they can be enlightened, or they can be happy, or they can be have all the riches and everything, and that will give them satisfaction or fulfillment. And it's not the case. It's actually the field of karma shaya. That's how yoga would put it. You're doing actions among things that are unreal, and so you're accumulating karma in that way. Very debilitating kinds of karmas that render you ineffective in even getting yourself out of the troubles of everyday life that you fall into. You can't extract yourself from situations that are problematic. You might get more and more attached to them, in fact. You see people with this kinds of malady, this kinds of preoccupations all the time. So the solution there would be to follow up affirmation with spiritual discipline. Find a teacher, get a path, do the practice, and get free. That's the long and the short of it. Find a teacher, get a practice, and do the practice, and get free. Because that's your true nature, it shouldn't be so hard. It's a matter of remembrance, and spiritual disciplines will help you remember that. Dharma will help you remember it. Because you never heard anything like this in church, you see. You never heard anything like this from your parents. Unless you were a very fortunate soul that had dharmic parents. Not just ethical religious parents I'm talking. People who are talking about the nature of your soul being pure and perfect, and a way to get there, a way to proving it for yourself. Pathway and means. That's very rare. And so rare that once every 500 years, 550 years before Christ was Buddha, and then Christ was 550 years later, and 550 years after that was Shankara, and 550 years after that, so-called, was Shankara. And every 500, 600, or 700 years, these great souls would come to relate the Dharma to you. And in any manifestation like that, there were a group of 12, 8, 16, or like 16 apostles of Ramakrishna who were standing there waiting for the Dharma to be transmitted and getting inshin denshin, straight from the mind and mouth of the great soul to their mind, and they were getting awakened. See? It's very possible that these great souls were already awakened, and that they just came with a great soul like that to get awakened in front of other people. Like, there are so many perfect souls that really don't need practice. My teacher used to say that. If we all knew who we were, or who we are, the Atman, or Buddha nature, then we wouldn't need to do spiritual practice. But so long as you don't know that for a fact, 100%, then you put on the mantle of spiritual practice. You also put on the mantle, a robe of a teacher, and you explain it to people how important that is. Shankara was a perfected soul. He took Govindapada as his teacher. Sri Ramakrishna was a perfected soul. He took 4 teachers. The Bhairavi Brahmani for tantric practices, Totapari for Advaita Vedanta meditation, and Govinda Rai for his Muslim teacher. So, these beings are already perfected. They take teachers. Why? To show you that you need to take a teacher. And that's why Swami Vivekananda was heard to say several times, you'll never get spirituality from a book or a temple. You can only get it from another soul. So in Zen, that's inshin denshin, transmission of Buddha nature, consciousness, from that great realized soul to your mind, as long as you're open and receptive to it. And then you take it and run with it. We used to call it lighting your torch. And you may have to go back several times to your teacher and get it relit. That's also part of your discipline. You can't keep it lit out in the world. You can keep it lit in the cave Go out in the wind, it's going to be hard, you see. So you're going to want to test yourself that way. And if you can go out and be non-reactive to the unreal world, if I want to pull this all together right now, the world is not real, only Brahman is real. And you have to go out in the world and prove that to yourself, that you are Buddha nature. Then you take your torch out there and see if you can keep it lit. And that means not reacting to all the suffering and all the hell that's going on out there, all the phenomena. You see, you're not getting sick by seeing it, by believing in it, because it's all unreal. Unreal means constantly changing all the time with no place to lay your head. Isn't that beautiful saying of Jesus? Birds have nests, foxes have holes. Son of Man has no place to lay his head on earth. So this is not your home, is what he's saying. Build your house on bedrock, not on sand, he said. Seek God, not mammon. I mean, there's so many ways in which even our own Christian ideal, Jesus, told us that this world was false. It's a false reading of reality. It's here as its underlying substratum. The world couldn't exist without Brahman existing. But Brahman exists without the world. That's one way you can prove it to yourself. Isn't that beautiful? The world cannot exist without Brahman. But Brahman exists without the world, because when you go into deep sleep and samadhi and so forth, the world disappears for you. There's the light, see? But you can't find the world anywhere. So this is why you need to have that enlightenment experience, so that you'll know that for a fact. See? And you won't fall victim to any of these different kinds of false paths, nor any of these kinds of false thoughts. So you won't entertain those anymore. All of them wiped out in one vision of totality. So, up at top here, the final quote: to take up a posture in the mind in order to master one's awareness and attain yoga, union with reality, will bring about what has been called by luminaries everywhere as balance of mind, steadiness of mind, equanimity of mind, purity of mind, equipoise, all leading to peace of mind, or the peace that passes all understanding. If you want, then there it is. Dayanjin, the great peace. See? And this is the great enlightenment, Dai Gedatsu. So these kinds of things you will have to realize. And it goes back to what he said here, right? It is all a question of the mind. Bondage and liberation are of the mind. Bondage and liberation are a duality that really don't exist. You're not free because you were never bound, and you're not bound because you're always free. See? So you can't be one or the other. You're ever free, never bound, is what you are, which is a phrase that Swami Vivekananda used. I titled one of my CDs after that saying, ever free, never bound. So if you think in terms of liberation, you have to say, I was once bound, right? But it's not true. You were never bound. So liberation's false. And of course you can't say, I'm bound and I'll get free in the future, because that would bespeak of a desire for a post-mortem emancipation. And that's not going to happen. You don't get freedom later, you're free now. At all times, in all circumstances, under all conditions, that's your true nature. You cannot bind the Atman, or Buddha nature. Bodies, egos, minds, thoughts, they can get bound. Nations, people, they can fall under the illusion of bondage and entertain that idea ignorantly. But the great soul will get this great affirmation and will follow it up with spiritual disciplines. They may want to do it for the first time in a series of lifetimes. Or they may come back like these great souls to do it again and again for the sake of others on the world scene. If you can come back and get enlightenment, as it were, like Sri Ramakrishna did in Calcutta in the 1800s, in front of all those people who were a Hindu race, who already knew about these teachings and had it deep inside of them since the get-go, you see, then you're making the most impression on the most amount of people in any given lifetime. So there's that kind of soul who blows the ship of ignorance out of the water. And then there's the kind of soul that must get their first enlightenment, see, experience in any given lifetime. They must have a conscious death, as I was saying, so that they can have their first conscious lifetime and be free and realize freedom. And both of those kinds of souls are, I'd say, equally important. So we were calling this, I didn't read it, but postures of the mind. You see, the mental asanas. Here's an asana, and you can get into other asanas, physical asanas, but that could be a problem, you see. Unenlightened person practicing Zen for bodily and mental health only. So I just went so far as to, do asanas and breathe a little, but I just became a healthy animal, and I never realized my divine nature. We have such a sentimentality about being human, that none of us want to be divine. But the problem is that we are divine by our very nature. Forget humanity, realize your divine nature. Who said that? Holy Mother. Forget your personality, realize your true nature. So that would be to have this great experience, this Daigatetsu. See, Daigadatsu. And then all of these are there. Now let's look at some of the moons of the teachings before we look at the flowers that he wonderfully cast at us. There's that story about him. They'd shoot arrows at him, but he'd throw flowers back at them. And the arrows would get deflected. And so this is his mental, Lord Buddha, that is, his mental state. Taking in all the sufferings and everything of the world, but giving back these Dharma teachings for the highest good of humanity. And we read this last week. Who shall gain victory over the earth, over Mara's sunken grounds, over Yama's realm, and even over the realm of the gods? It is that wise one who will select and study the teachings of the Dharma, like a discerning gardener selects the choicest flowers. So, you will gain victory over death, over Mara's sunken grounds, and over the world, and also over the realm of the gods, by having this enlightenment experience. Choosing the choicest teachings. So this is what Ribi is about, some of these Zen Buddhist teachings that are moons and flowers. And it doesn't usually occur to beings of this nature, see. That kind of freedom doesn't occur to them. They're thinking of wealth, basically. I seek pleasure, I seek wealth, see. So it would be like Kalas singing. Namajapane kyun chordiya ramanam japane kyun chordiya rama namajapane kyun chordiya krodana chora jutana chora krodana chora jutana chora satavachane kyun chordiya rama namajapane kyun chordiya rama nam japane kyun Japane Kyun Jordia. Tell me, O mind, Kalas speaks to himself, why have you given up uttering the holy name of Ram, when you should be renouncing your anger, deceit, and dishonesty? You have given up your integrity and sacrificed your love of truth instead. You flatter the millionaire, yet forget to praise Sri Ram, though Ram is the owner of the entire universe. Your mind dwells constantly on sense objects and mundane habits, tempted by that which has no eternal existence. Emptiness. It's empty. Is it for the sake of these fleeting things that you have forsaken the precious gem of Sri Ram's name? Somebody told me at the break just today, I always keep the mantra going all the time, see, and try and do that in all ways and all times. Keep that holy name of the Lord, which is sweet to taste on the tongue, they say. It's very exhilarating for the mind to keep your thoughts in that high level. So that would be one way of telling your mind to give up unreal things and focus on the moons and flowers of the Lord Buddha's teachings. That is the Dharma. So we've already said Dai Gadatsu is this great enlightenment and Dai Anjin is this great peace. We also talked about Sambho being the triple gem. That is, they call it triple treasure, triple gem. Guru, or let's put it in Buddhist terms, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So Buddha, the Shakyamuni, the enlightened soul itself, and then Dharma, all of these teachings, which are endless, the ocean of Dharma teachings, about which Milarepa said when he got him from Marpa, who came from India over the Himalayas into Tibet and brought Buddhism to Tibet, told him the Dharma, and then he said, when I think about the Dharma, I only want to share it with others. So Milarepa's whole life became sharing Dharma with other beings. That was what he liked the most. And he would often sing it to you when you came up to him. Even if he had never met you, his whole life, and you'd appear in front of him for the first time, he'd look at you and then he'd sing something at you. And it would be something about the Dharma and how you have some sort of association with it. Itai is another moon there. Itai means, it's a Japanese word that really means of one body. Then so it means body of the teachings, or the body of enlightenment, might be a better way of putting it. We are all of one body of enlightenment. So that's a great moon teaching. Mushin just means original mind. Like in Japanese it could even mean like innocence. So the natural or innocent mind, the way it naturally is before all these clouds and coverings come over it, you see. All the happenings of the world and the conditionings of society and upbringing and all the problems that we bring forth. Before all that happens, let's go back. There's Mushin, this beautiful, innocent mind, that is Buddha mind. So it again bespeaks the idea that perfection always was and always is. It's not something that we're discovering anew. It's something that's recurring to us once we move the veils out of the way. That's the way India always thought of it. So it's kind of hard to go into the Indian darshanas and speak about root ignorance, like it had some cause. When the true nature of things is causeless, birthless and deathless. And that's the non-dual philosophy that gets so well presented and expressed in Indian darshanas. Yoga, Vedanta, Samkhya, Tantra, Buddhism, of course, all expressing this pure, perfect, divine nature without any overlays and without any false superimpositions and without any conditionings, They just happen, as it were, apparently. And they never really affect the divine nature. Let's look at some of the flowers then that Lord Buddha is throwing our way. Shall we catch some? There's that Nenge Misho. You see, that's smiling and twirling a flower. He's got a flower in his hand. So I told you the story at the beginning of the class about how Lord Brahma took a body and asked him to discourse on the Dharma, and he just smiled and twirled his flower. That's called Nenge Isho. And Nenge Misho is just mind to mind. Means that you need to get into the company of one of these beings and have all your conditionings rent apart, all the veils rent asunder, and see truth face to face, hear it, then go and realize it and begin to savor it, as I said. Spend your time in it. No better way to spend your time. And in fact, you say, well, what about serving others? You want to get your enlightenment first before you serve others. Sort of like the airlines, put your own mask on first before helping others. So too many mistakes are made by people who are suffering Zen sicknesses, and they go out and try and help the world. And their help comes with conditionings that are in them. I used to, as a recording engineer, used to put signals on tape, right? Music is called. And there would be overloads that would happen that the VO meters couldn't detect. So you couldn't hear it, you couldn't hear the distortions in the first generation, nor could you see it via the VO meters, because it was too quick for them to register. Later, when you made a duplication, the second generation and the third generation, it came down to cassette in the old days or to CD, then you heard the distortion. So it was there all the time and you couldn't hear it. So you had to go back to your original material and re-record it and make sure that it wasn't overloading the tape. That was in the old days of analog. See? I mean, digital still has that problem, of course, but you'd erase the distortion on the tape and you'd re-record a pure signal over it. So I always thought about that in terms of a spiritual teaching, about how teachings can go in and, not get fully digested, and then people would go out with a immature way of thinking and try and do good, and those distortions would go through their actions and lodge in other people's minds, and you'd see the effects, not the desirable effects that you wanted. So it's metaphorically speaking, a way of being very careful about how you take in the Dharma. Once I was asked to mow the lawn for my guru, and was putting the lawnmower away at the end. Or actually, I was getting the lawnmower out of the car, and trying to put it in the car, and I was trying to fold the handlebars forward so it could fit in the trunk. And it wouldn't go forward, so I forced it, and I broke these two little tabs off that were holding the handlebars open. I should have reached down there and pushed the tabs, and then if I had 3 hands, it would have been easy, you see, the way they set it up. Then my teacher saw me break those tabs, and everyone was getting ready for a big scolding, you see. Oh, he's going to get scolded now, because my teacher was good at scolding. And so he looked at me, and I was ready for a scolding. And he said, "That's a precision instrument. You have to know how to use a precision instrument." Then, classic pause. And Vedanta, too, is a precision instrument. You have to know how to use it. So he turned this worldly incident that could happening there, you see, into this profound teaching about being very careful about learning the teachings before you try and inshin denshin, transmit them from mind to mind. Because you want the transmission to be as pure and as clear as possible. And yes, people aren't going to understand it. They're going to maybe misconstrue what you say. That happens a lot in the realm of guru-shishya-disciple relationship. But nevertheless, your part is to make it as clear as possible. Their part is to come back and get clarification. See? You take the teachings away and you apply them and they don't work, you have to come back to your teacher and say, what did I misunderstand here? Why isn't this working? And then go through it and clarify it. You like going back and re-recording the signal so there's no distortion on it. So all of that is for people who are very sensitive, see, about spiritual transmission. They take it very seriously, and they may take lifetimes to find a teacher worthy of teaching, because how many lifetimes can you have in 500 years? Between Buddha and Christ? 550 years, so you're somewhere in there wandering around. You want to find a great teacher, so there's 6 lifetimes there that you could have spent between those two great souls. And it's not like you have to be born at the same time they are to get the teachings, but it'd be nice to be born just after they're there, because if you wait 2,000 years to get Christ's teachings, as we know, it's not going to end up being very good. There are 147,000 differences between the original Bible and King James Version nowadays. 147,000 differences in the two. So you've got to wonder there over 2,000 years, you know, what did he say? How was it really said? How many languages did it come through? How many hands did it pass through? Is King James an illumined soul? You see, there might be a lot of distortions there. I'm going to have to be a lot of re-recording, you know. So these are all things that, if you keep yourself close to the source in any given lifetime, you know. In fact, they say, as soon as you're born, as soon as they're born, souls who are realized or sensitive, spiritually sensitive souls, they rush to a teacher and get initiated right away. First thing they do, they get mantra diksha. They take refuge with the Buddha, they take hand with the Sufis, whatever religion they're attracted to and attached to and benefit by, they'll get initiation immediately into that fold. Hopefully when they're still young, you see, in their teens. And that's because you want to not play around with Mara, you see, or Maya, Mayoi, see. You do not want to play around with that. Is very wise people have fallen into trouble by messing around with Maya. So you get this teacher, Guru Dharma Sangha, Buddha Dharma Sangha, Sambho, you get this under wraps every lifetime until you can keep your torch lit. See? And then you can celebrate with them. See, it's not the celebration that, oh, I had my first experience here, you see, and I'm enlightened now. And the Buddha will have to say, no, you're not. You've got a long ways to go. That's some sort of pretense, but you have that first enlightenment experience they talk about in these words, these kinds of words. Satori, Kensho, Ku, Busho, Jisho. That's 52 generations later from Lord Buddha's lifetime that these words came about for great enlightenment experience in Japan, you see. So they took it very seriously, didn't they? Now let's look at some of the flowers as we wind down our second class on Zen Buddhism. There you see at the top of this list, Inchinen Fusho, thoughts not arising. If you put it into English from the Japanese, the way they put it is almost Yoda-like, right? So you have these great expressions that come out in Japanese language that convey to you a sort of intriguing way of hearing it. Thoughts not arising. It's not like saying, my thoughts are not coming up anymore. Thoughts not arising. And also along with it, hakushi, white paper, empty mind. That's why people like Zen, because they hear something like that and it appeals to them. It's not wordy. It appeals to their sense of formlessness. It appeals to their sense of peace. Peace that passes all understanding. I don't have to do a lot of book work and ritual, because Zen does not have a romance with ritual at all. It's pretty much free of ritual, except maybe you might have a tea service, tea ceremony with the Roshi, or this thing called the Way of the Flowers, where you're using flowers for worship. So every religion has some sort of ritual in it. Basically, Zen is pretty much stripped free of a lot of ritual, and it really has more of a romance with this Busho, with this Buddha nature, with this emptiness. And so you find ways of explaining emptiness like that. Thoughts not arising. How are you doing today? Thoughts not arising. And so you're pretty happy, you're pretty peaceful, you're pretty content, and you want to keep it that way. So you go back the next day and ask them, did any more thoughts arise? White paper, empty mind. And it inspires you to go do the same. You see somebody with empty mind and you go, that looks nice, for a change. Maybe you'll try it and it wasn't quite for you yet, but you entertained it, and it'll always be with you. Because that is the nature of Buddha nature, to be empty, not to be full of forms. I say nature abhors a vacuum. Spirituality loves a vacuum. And it's not an empty vacuum. That is not empty of substance. The real substance is in emptiness. That's the real substance of things. It's stripped away of all forms that are weights on you. Possessions, for instance, right? Wealth, for instance. Should I go back and should we take a look at all the things that are weights on this poor soul? See, that's just completely deluding her for lifetimes. That caused her to fall into the conditions that she's in right now. So, yes, this is something to think about. And of course, you've got the Diamond Sutra here in this tradition. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness. That's like something that has been sequestered out of the whole sutras and held up as everyone's favorite statement, but it's actually really something that, again, you're going to have to realize for yourself. You can't just say it and walk around mimicking it and think that that's going to be true for you. You're going to have to know not only what form is, but you're going to have to know what formlessness is. How can you know? How can you say that if you haven't found out yet what formlessness is? Then deep sleep formlessness isn't going to do it, because you didn't take your Buddha nature there with you last night, you see. If you had have taken it there, what would you have seen? What's the one word that can describe what you would see in deep sleep if you had your Buddha nature with you? Seeds. You would see the seeds for the dream state and the waking state in your deep sleep state. Everything came out of formlessness. So the seeds for everything is back in your deep sleep state. And the souls who go there in meditation to formlessness, which is like deep sleep, see that the seeds for everything is back in their own mind. See? And all it needed was to march out to become a couch and a rug and a world and a person. But its seed was back in there. What does that tell you? Everything's eternal. Everything's birthless and deathless. Everything is beyond beginnings and endings. It's all eternal. So this is the import of formlessness, or emptiness. That's not even on the ultimate level yet. That's just on the level of clarification. When you see that all of this came from seeds, and those seeds are within you, then you can quit watering the seeds. It's pretty much that simple. You water the seeds of desire and they sprout worlds, and they sprout people, and they sprout relatives, and they sprout children, and they sprout desires, And those desires turn to karmas, and those karmas turn into samskars in the mind, and those samskars turn into more lifetimes. And lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, fear, shame, grief, all come marching along with it, you see. So do beauty and love and every other good thing comes marching along with it. But it's all an admixture. Lord Buddha would say, architect of these worlds, I have seen you. Now I will not build any more houses. I will not build houses of wood. I will not build houses of stone. I will not build houses of flesh and bone. I will not build houses of wise conception. So he's done with form. Have no hope forevermore for me, for the world. I'm gone and gone forever. One of his great statements. So he's not going to water seeds anymore. He's done with that. This is something we have to face off with in the West, is that our true nature is formlessness, and that formlessness is where the peace that passes all understanding is. Christ saw it, you see. He was the light of the worlds, right? That light is formless. That light is not a vacuum. It's not empty of substance. It's empty of forms. And that's a good thing. So when we face off with this, we can begin to have formless experiences that will maybe lead us to having great enlightenment or great peace or original mind or the feeling that we're all one body, you see. These teachings lead to these great moons. And without them, then we're getting lost, you see, in morality and ethics and churchiness and ritual and so forth. And Zen doesn't want any of that. See, it wants to give you the Dharmic teachings that lead you to the truth principles, re-be. See. And when you have those truth principles, you have the grasp upon them, then they consider you safe. See. Safe from Mara, safe from Maya, safe from Mayoi, safe from sickness, safe from falling out of oneness with your true nature. So think of that when you think of thoughts not arising. I'm in a formless state. And that was a good thing. I came out of deep sleep and I feel great. I think maybe I won't dream anymore. From dreams awake, from bonds be free. Know the truth. Thou art he, thou art she. My teacher used to quote that. From dreams awake, from bonds be free. So, in Vedanta, if you go and ask what the significance of dreams are, they will say to awaken from all of them. We're not going to interpret them for you. It should be obvious to you. In fact, most dreams are what they call 1,000 imbecilities of the mind. You notice? Dreams are so stupid. See? One person wrote me recently and said, how do I make my dreams lucid? See? I said, well, that's easy. Make your waking state lucid. You think you can have wonderful dreams and control over your dreams if your waking state's a mess? That doesn't happen, you see. So you work from the A to the U, and from the U to the M. What's that spell? What's that spell? Om, Om. A is waking state, U is dreaming state, and M is the deep sleep state. And beyond that is this, right? The little one-eyed smile, Shvara it's called, that's Turiya. It's beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So when you see the seeds inside of you in the deep sleep state, if you take your Buddha nature inside with you and you see that everything comes from seeds, Om, Aim, Hring, Shrim, Krim, Klim, Hum, Swat, Swaha, Bijams, they're called in our tradition. They're in your mantra. you see. You count them on your 5 fingers of your hand. See. So if you see all of that in there, then you'll know that beyond these seeds, there is a formless state where seeds don't exist. And that's called Turiya, the 4th state of your awareness. There are 3 worlds, but there's also a 4th state of awareness beyond them. That's where these names for Buddha nature apply. And these states for the experience of having awakening apply. Let's take the second couplet here, because we're not going to make it through all of this class. We can pick this up next week. Shoso funi. That's Japanese word for non-duality. And moku funi, silent non-two. That's another way of putting it. The silent non-two. Sometimes you hear that when people say, it's all one, it's oneness. And then the teacher says, don't call it that. You're limiting it by calling it one. Call it not two. So you don't want to limit Brahman, Allah, Buddha nature, Almighty Father. It's borderless, it's boundaryless, it's all expansive, it's all pervasive. So you want to make sure not to do it any injustice with an expression that doesn't describe it well. That's why many religions left the name for God out of the picture, right? Be reading along in the Jewish scriptures and there's a word that has a letter and then a blank after it. It applies to non-dual reality. I'm not going to name it, right? So Judaism, Muslim religion, Advaita Vedanta, Zen Buddhism, very careful with their words in that respect. So not two would be good. And here Zen Buddhism actually does a kind of one-upmanship on it, silent not two. Let's just make sure that we know that it's beyond the realm of the ears and tongue and words. It's complete inner peace. That's the next one. Jakujo, complete inner peace. And Dai Anjin, we had that, great peace of mind. And there's Inshin Denshin, transmitting mind through mind. That's when he's twirling a flower, that story. And Fugyo Nigyo is doing by not doing. That's here too on our reference chart. You see, Fugyo Nigyo, spontaneous doing by not doing. And what does it look like? What would we call it in Sanskrit, in Vedanta? Nishkama karma. That is silent action done out of oneness. Selfless action out of oneness, it says. So, nishkama karma or sakama karma. Kama is desire, right? So nishkama would be doing your work without any desire whatsoever. No desire for its outcome, no desire for any return. Completely selfless works. No reaction if it turns out bad. No elation if it turns out good. That's the law of karma yoga. Doing by not doing. In Zen, it's the Roshi walking across rice paper without leaving a wrinkle. In Vedanta, it's a bird flying through the sky, leaving no trace of itself. That's what the metaphors they use in Zen and Advaita Vedanta to try and communicate to you what selfless action is about. And so, a beautiful way of saying they're doing by not doing. Krishna, probably the most stultifying sutra, sloka in the whole Gita, Bhagavad Gita, is that they who know that action is in inaction and inaction is in action, they truly know. People go, what did he just say? So it's pointed at here very directly in Zen too. Or you could put here, all acts spontaneously arising. It has to do with that, interdependent arising, they call it. Everything is dependent on something else and connected under the surface. But you don't see that on the surface, how everything is connected. People have that intuition that everything's connected, but they don't actually know the dynamics of how the thing surfaced, so they can't really describe it. It's just a feeling, an intuition they have. And finally, to end here with a few minutes left, Osho Sheki, leaving no trace. That's like that bird flying through the sky. So we got through a little over half of that chart on Zen Buddhist truth principles. We'll pick it up next Sunday, and in that way go on with this 5-class series on Zen Buddhism, which we like to try and take advantage of maybe once or twice a year. In fact, we've had 2 Zen retreats I've taught in the years SRV has been in existence, since late 1980s. So next week I have with me, and I will bring some of the haiku that my students composed on those Zen retreats, and we'll read them out loud, show you how 3 or 4 days of Zen practice can put you in a mood to create a haiku, or maybe even help you penetrate through all the problems in the way, all the overlays in the way, by meditating on a koan. See, so like slithering serpent never caught in its own coils. That's a nice Zen koan, you see. And so there are many Zen koans, but we did write some haiku, and we'll share those maybe next week with all of you. See how people of the West in this day and time, who are dipping into the Zen teachings, who are, even if they're based here in Vedanta and yoga and so forth, can lend their minds to such great traditions and come up with some beautiful ways of expressing what is inexpressible. So here, let's end with a chant. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrini Mahe, Gatong Yagyaya, Gatong Ye Nupataye, Daivi Svastrastu Naha, Svastir Manusebhyaha, Urdhvam Jagatu Bhesajam, Sangnoastu Dvipade Sangchatushpate, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a great offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity also then abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om